Welcome to the demonstration for configuring mailbox archiving, provisioning, and processing. This demonstration reinforces the concepts covered in Lesson 6 of the Enterprise Vault 10 for Exchange Administration course. In this demonstration, we will implement the steps necessary to set up the Exchange mailbox archiving. You manually perform the steps using the Enterprise Vault Administration console, but you could also perform these steps using the Enterprise Vault Getting Started wizard. These steps in this demonstration include creating retention categories, preparing the welcome message, provisioning the mailboxes, enabling the mailboxes, archiving mail items, and then searching the mailbox archives. So the first thing we want to do is go and look at the default retention category that comes with Enterprise Vault. So under our policies here, you can see that we have the retention categories node. So I can click on that. And there is a default retention category created as part of the setup and configuration of Enterprise Vault. So we're going to go look at the properties of the default retention category. So I click on that, and then I select Properties, and the Property dialog box opens up. We'll notice that the retention period for the default retention category has the check mark for Retain Items Forever. So therefore, these items will not be deleted. And remember from the lesson, we said that every item had to have a retention category. That's why we create this default retention category so that you can assign it to all the different items, but nothing will be deleted until after you've come in and create your own custom retention categories for the exact retention period that you need for your particular requirements. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to create two retention categories for our environment. So I'll go ahead and click OK here to close out this dialog box. To create our new retention categories, we can just come up to the retention categories node. We can right click on it. We can select the new option, and then we will be prompted for a retention category. So I click on retention category, and it opens up the new retention category wizard. Once the wizard is open, I can then go ahead and go to the next dialog box. And in this particular dialog box, we're going to be specifying a name and a description for our retention category. So the first retention category we're going to create, we're going to call this our standard retention. Our assumption is that this is probably going to be assigned to the majority of our users. So for our description, we'll go ahead and put in there for most of our data. Then we click our next button to go to the next dialog box. And you can see by default, it comes up with 6 years, but we've decided that most of our data only needs to be retained for 3 years. So we'll change this value to 3. Then we can go ahead and click next. And you can see there's a summary, what it's getting ready to create. We go ahead and click Finish. And it says that it was able to create our retention category for us. So we can go ahead and click Close. And now you can see the retention category and the list of available retention categories. And it shows you the retention period of 3 years. So we're going to have a second retention category that's going to be for some additional users in our environment. And this one's going to have a longer retention category. So I go ahead and I click Retention Categories, then I click New, and again Retention Category to start the Retention Category wizard. Once the wizard starts up, I can go ahead and click Next. Now for this group, I have a group of people that I'm calling priority users. So I'll go ahead and name this Priority Retention for that group. And then for my description, I'll go ahead and say that this is for our higher priority data. So I'll go ahead and click Next. And we don't need it for 6 years, but we definitely need it longer than 3, so we're going to set it for 5. And that's our company policy for our priority information. So I go ahead and click Next again. Here's my summary. I click my Finish button. And then I can click Close. And now I see that I've got the priority retention category available that has a retention period of 5 years. So the next thing we want to do in preparation for setting up our Exchange mailbox archiving is to set up the welcome message. The welcome message introduces mailbox users to the Enterprise Vault functionality. You want to create this message before you enable the mailboxes for archiving in order to notify the users of the changes to their mailbox. In this demonstration, you will customize and enable the welcome message. So to do this, first off, we have to go to the where the welcome message is located, and that's going to be in a folder under the installation directory for Enterprise Vault. So we'll open up our Windows Explorer, and we've installed the Enterprise Vault on the D drive. So we'll select our computer here, select our D drive, and then it's installed in a folder called Program x86. So I can open that folder up, and then I open up the Enterprise Vault folder. And then the next place we need to go to get to the welcome message is under the Languages folder. So I go into the Languages folder, and you can see that I have a section specifically available for the mailbox messages. So I can go ahead and open up that folder by clicking on it, and it has a list of the supported language folders. And again, for this demonstration, we'll be using English. I'll go ahead and open up the EN two-letter abbreviation for English, and you can see that I have several different messages that are defined here. We have the disable mailbox message if I was going to be disabling their mailbox, but because this is the first time we set it up, we want the enable mailbox message. We will come back in a later demonstration and look at the enable PST messages. So I go ahead and I want to copy this message though, because I want to leave the original here. So I'll go ahead and copy it. And then once I've copied it, I need to move it to the Enterprise Vault root directory. So I'll go ahead and come up here and click on Enterprise Vault to go to the root directory. And then I can select the option to paste it. And then, of course, it reorganizes everything alphabetically. So I'll hit my scroll bar to get back up to where it's placed. And now I'm ready to open it for editing. So I'll click on the message itself to open it up. And now you can see that the welcome message comes with red text. This red text gives you some instructions on some things that you may want to do within the Enterprise Vault welcome message to help you inform your users on what they can do with the Enterprise Vault add-on, which we'll be installing later in another demonstration. So typically what you do is you can come in and read this red text. Once you're done reading the red text, you would then want to go ahead and delete the red text. So I've gone ahead and gone through and deleted all the red text for us. And then also you have the option of customizing this message for your particular company. So what I'm going to do is, just so that we can recognize that this is the modified version of the welcome message, I'm going to add the word demonstration here to the end of the welcome message. Now once you set up the message, we need to save these changes that we've made. So I'll come up here and click on my Office button, select Save. Now that the message has been saved, I can go ahead and close it. And once I've enabled everyone's mailbox, that welcome message will be sent to everyone who has their mailbox enabled. The next thing we want to look at doing is setting up provisioning. The provisioning groups are going to enable the administrators to assign policies to our users, assign default vault stores for mailbox archives, and the policies that we'll be assigning will be the desktop policy, the mailbox policy, and the PST migration policies. We can also assign retention categories for the users. We also have the option of automatically enabling the mailboxes that are added to the provisioning groups. And the provisioning group targets can be any of the following: Windows group, Windows user, distribution group, organizational unit, a lightweight directory access protocol query, or I can actually set it up for the whole Exchange organization. In our demonstration, we're going to be setting up 3 separate provisioning groups. The first is going to be standard users. They will be for our entire organization. We will have priority users, which are going to be for a Windows security group we've created for the department heads. And then we'll have laptop users, which will be assigned to users who are a member of our laptop group, which is everyone who connects with a laptop. So what I need to do is I need to navigate to where I can create the provisioning groups. So that's going to be under our targets. So I come up and expand our targets. And we are going to be dealing with our Exchange environment here. So I'll expand Exchange. Then I can expand our domain, example.com. And then that gets us down to the point where we're ready to start creating the provisioning group. So I can right-click on the provisioning group and say that I want to create a new provisioning group. This launches the new provisioning group wizard. Once the wizard is started, you can see again it gives you a summary of the things that can be configured as part of the new provisioning group wizard. So I can go ahead and click next. And the first thing I need to do is to give it a name. And the first one that we'll create will be for our standard users. Then we go ahead and click next. And now we need to add in our targets. So for this one, we'll click the add button. And we're going to change it to be the whole Exchange organization. This is going to be the kind of catch-all for all of the different users who don't fall into one of the other provisioning groups. So we'll go ahead and click OK. You can now see that the whole Exchange organization is in the list of targets. And again, you could add as many or as few different targets as you wished at this point. So we'll go ahead and click next because all we need to add is the whole Exchange organization. Now for a whole Exchange organization, we want them to have the standard mailbox policy. So I'll come up here and change the mailbox policy and select the standard mailbox policy. We will leave the other two policies the way they are. And we'll go ahead and click next. Now we've got the option of specifying the retention category. And we remember we created that 3-year long standard retention. And since that's going to be for our standard users, we will select the standard retention. Then I can go ahead and click my next button. And here we're going to specify that where we want the items to be stored, which vault store we want them stored in. And because these are going to be associated with mailboxes and not our journal, we want to specifically tell it to store it in the information management vault store that we created in a previous demonstration. So we'll click here to override our inherited settings. We've selected the information management vault store. Then we can go ahead and click next. Now at this point, if we wish, we could go ahead and automatically enable the mailboxes, but we want to show you how to manually enable the mailboxes later in this lesson. So we're going to leave that unchecked for right now. We'll come back and change that later. So I'll go ahead and click next. I get the summary of all the different options that I have selected. So I can go ahead and click finish. And it says that it did successfully create my provisioning group. So I can go ahead and click close. And you can now see that the first provisioning group created was the standard users. It's got the default Exchange desktop policy. It's got the standard mailbox policy with the default Exchange PST migration policy, as well as the standard retention. So everything that we set up inside of there is being displayed at this particular point. Well, now we're ready to create our next provisioning group. So we'll go back to our provisioning group node. We'll right-click on it and select New Provisioning Group. So I click New Provisioning Group. Once again, the new provisioning group wizard opens up. We click our next button to move on. Now this one's going to be for our department heads, but because we've been naming the groups associated with priority items to have the word priority in them, I'll just go ahead and call this provisioning group the priority users. I'll go ahead and click my next button, and then I need to add my targets. So I click add. But this time we're going to be adding a Windows group that we'd already created that we know exists in the Active Directory. And we select Windows group if that particular group is a security group. If the group that we had created in Windows was only for mail, we could select the distribution option to add a distribution group to our list. But ours is a Windows security group. So we'll go ahead and click OK here. Now we have to select the group that we wish to use. And the group that we've created in Active Directory for our priority users, we've named department heads. So I come over and click Add to add it to my list of available groups. And then I can click OK. And now we see that the department heads have been added. Once again, I could add more targets if I wished, but I know that I've got everybody that I need for this provisioning group in that Windows group. So I'll go ahead and click Next. And we want to change the mailbox policy to be the priority users mailbox policy. And we created the mailbox policies in a previous demonstration. I can go ahead and click Next once I've selected that priority mailbox policy. We're going to change retention category. We just got done earlier in this demonstration creating that 5-year long retention category called priority retention. So we'll assign that to our priority provisioning group. Then we can go ahead and click Next. And again, this is going to be for Mailbox Archive, so I'll override the default settings and select the Information Management Vault Store. Then I can click Next. Once again, we want to show you how to manually enable all the mailboxes. So I'll leave the automatically enable mailboxes checkbox empty at this point. Go ahead and click Next. I've got my summary available, so I can click Finish. And it was able to successfully create our provisioning group, so I can go ahead and click Close. And once again, we now have our priority users with their default desktop policy, priority mailbox policy, default Exchange PST migration policy, but with the priority retention. We also said that we wanted to create an additional provisioning group for my laptop users. So for one more time, we'll go back through this process. We click on our provisioning groups, we go to New, we select our provisioning group option, we start the new provisioning group wizard again, we go ahead and click Next, and we're going to name this one Laptop Users. Then we click Next. We're going to add our target in again, so I click my Add button. Once again, we've already created a security group for our laptop users, so I'll just leave the Windows group option selected. I go ahead and click OK. I scroll down to my laptop users. I select my laptop users, add them to my list by clicking Add. Then I can click OK. And now we have our laptop users group as a target. So I click Next so I can start providing the different policies. And again, in a previous lesson, we had created the laptop users desktop policy. So we'll select the laptop users desktop policy. We will also assign them the standard mailbox policy. So I'll open up the mailbox policies and select standard mailbox policy. Once I'm done assigning the policies, I click my Next. I will change their retention category to be standard retention. So open up the drop down and select our standard retention. Then I click Next again. Again, even my laptop users are going to be the mailboxes, so I want them in my information management group. And I click Next. We're going to leave the automatically enabled mailboxes empty again. Here I've got my summary. And of course, if I wanted to change things, I could always do the back to go back and change something in the summary if I had selected the wrong option. I go ahead and click Finish. It says that it did create our provisioning group satisfactorily. So I can go ahead and click Close. And now I have my 3 provisioning groups. If you remember from the lesson though, as I go through and run the provisioning task will process the provisioning groups starting with the first one in the list, which has the highest rank. Well, my standard users provisioning group is for the whole Exchange organization. So I really want that to be the last one in the list, or the one with the lowest ranking. So I need to go and change the ranking. The way that I do that is I open up the properties of the provisioning group node. So I click on it, select the properties, and then from the properties you can see it lists the different provisioning groups that I've assigned. So I want to move the priority users up, so I select priority users, and you see I've got a move up and move down button. Well, I want to move this group up, and then I also want to move my laptop users up as well. So I'll select my laptop users, move them up, and then once I've got them in the correct order that I wish, I can go ahead and click OK. And now if someone belongs to the priority users, they will get processed first, which means I won't process them for any additional provisioning group. Then I can process the laptop users. Once again, if they're captured in the laptop users provisioning group, I will not have to process them for my standard users. And we'll be able to see this in more detail when we go and run the provisioning task in report mode, and we can see exactly how this processing is taking place. So now we need to go and start and run our provisioning task. So I'll go down here and expand my Enterprise Vault servers. And then I have to expand the server itself, EV server. Then I click on my tasks node. And I can see that my Exchange provisioning task for my example.com domain is currently stopped. So I want to go ahead and start that. So I can right click on it, select start. And you can see here that the status is switched over to running. So I'll go ahead and run the provisioning task by right clicking on it and selecting run now. But because I haven't tested out my provisioning group membership yet, when I'm setting everything up, I think I'm going to run it in report mode first so I can go and verify that the correct numbers are ending up in the correct groups. So I'll select the in report mode. I go ahead and click OK. I get a prompt that tells me that the provisioning task has started processing. So I can go ahead and click OK to acknowledge that. Now in our particular environment, we don't have very many people that we have to process. So my status almost instantaneously went to running. However, if you are processing a lot of different provisioning groups with a lot of different users, you may actually catch the status at processing, and then after a period of time it will switch over to running. So let's go ahead and go and view our report. So I need to navigate to the reports folder under the Enterprise Vault installation directory. So I open my Windows Explorer, and again we installed Enterprise Vault on our computer under our D drive. We expand our program files, or open up our program files folder, open up our Enterprise Vault folder. Then we can come down to the reports folder, which is where our reports go. Click on reports folder, open it up. And then you can see that there's a subfolder under reports specifically for Exchange provisioning. So we can go ahead and open up the Exchange provisioning folder. And now I'm ready to open up the Exchange provisioning report based upon us just running the provisioning task in report mode. So I'll go ahead and open that up. Once I've got it open, I'll go ahead and maximize it so it's a little easier to see. And you can see that the first thing that it processes are managed folders. Managed folders are configured in Exchange, and it has to do with the fact that you can set up retention periods in Exchange for different folders. And then if you have Enterprise Vault correctly set up, it'll move those particular managed folder settings over and create retention categories for them. We are not doing any managed folder administration here, so that's why those are all set up at 0. Then we get into the provisioning groups. You can see that it processed the priority users first, and it added 8 mailboxes based upon that group membership. And there are actually 8 users in the department head security group, so that's good. And then we come down and we can see that it processed and added 1 mailbox to our laptop users provisioning group. And that works out currently because we only have 1 user in that Windows group. And then we get down to the 37 mailboxes added that were not previously added. And I can see that the other mailboxes were previously added because it comes down and says that there were 9. 8 in the priority users provisioning group and 1 in the laptop users provisioning group that had already been processed. So once I've seen that information, I'll scroll down just to make sure there's nothing else down at the bottom. It looks like everything happened. There's no errors. So now I can go ahead and close the report, and I'll run the provisioning task in normal mode. So I close my report, close my Windows Explorer, come back to the Exchange provisioning task for the example.com domain, right-click on it, and select Run Now. But now that we've tested it out and we're sure that everything's working the way that we expect and the right people are in the right provisioning groups, we'll run it in normal mode. I go ahead and click OK. Once again, it reminds me that it is processing. When I click OK again, you can see that once again I missed the processing part of the status, and it was able to process and actually implement those items that were in the provisioning groups and went right straight to running pretty quickly. So now we're ready to enable the mailboxes. And before the mailbox archiving can take place, those provisioned mailboxes must be enabled in Enterprise Vault. In this demonstration, we'll use the Enable Mailbox Wizard to enable the mailboxes for archiving. And at the end of this section, we will go back to our provisioning groups and set them up to automatically enable any new mailboxes that might be added to the provisioning groups. So I'll do this by first starting my Exchange archiving task. I can right click on that and select Start. Once I have the Exchange archiving task running, I want to go ahead and synchronize all my mailboxes before I start the enabling process. So I'll go ahead and once again right click on my Exchange mailbox archiving task for server 1 and select the properties. Then I will go to the synchronization tab, and then I will click my synchronize button. And I can see here under the progress that it says that the synchronization of my Enterprise Vault with the details from the Exchange server 1 has been queued. So it's doing this in the background. So I can go ahead and click OK to close the property page. And now I'm ready to enable my mailboxes. If I hadn't done that synchronization, I wouldn't have seen the mailboxes in the list of available mailboxes as I go through the Enable Mailbox Wizard. So I can go ahead and click Tools, and I have the option to enable the mailboxes. This starts off my Enable Mailbox Wizard. The first thing it asks me for is which Exchange server do I wish to enable mailboxes on. We only have the one Exchange server, which is server 1. So I'll go ahead and click Next. And then I can go ahead and list all of the available mailboxes for enabling, or I could just search for a particular mailbox. So if I wanted to go through and just enable 2 or 3 mailboxes at a time, if I'm doing an initial setup, then I could do it that way. But in our environment, we don't have that many mailboxes to initially enable. So let's go ahead and do a list of all the available ones. And then I click Next. Here you do see that you got the option of selecting all the new mailboxes that weren't previously enabled, or I can also see the mailboxes that have been disabled. So again, if I've been running for a while, there might be 2 or 3 mailboxes that I disabled for some reason, and now I'm ready to enable them again, so I can come back here and just view those disabled mailboxes in the list. But we're a new installation, so we want to do all the new mailboxes. So I'll just go ahead and go over here and do a select all. However, I do remember now that the Enterprise Vault mailbox is on server 1, and I don't wish to enable that for archiving. So I'll scroll down, see the Enterprise Vault service account, EV service. I'll do a control click on the EV service account, and then I'll go ahead and click Next. Now at this point here, it comes up and gives me the summary of the individual mailboxes and the Vault Store and retention category that they're going to be assigned. I do have the option at this point of changing the Vault Store. I could click under one of the Vault Stores and pick a different one. The same thing for the retention category. I could open up a drop down and select a different retention category. Also notice that I am getting different retention categories here for Anthony Jones. They're getting a priority retention category, whereas Charles Smith is getting the standard retention category. So I can see that there are different mailboxes in the different provisioning groups between my standard users and laptop users versus my priority users provisioning group. So again, it's another reinforcement that everything looks like they're being assigned correctly. So I go ahead and click my Next button. And this is where we would assign billing. Our particular company is not doing charging for the storage of Enterprise Vault. So we'll just leave the default mailbox's primary account for this. So I go ahead and click Next. And then you got the option of specifying when you wish the archiving to start. You can do it immediately or when the user decides. But we want to make sure that the archiving process starts immediately for the mailboxes. So we'll go ahead and click Next. Then we get a summary of all the different mailboxes that have been selected for enablement. And then we can go ahead and click our Finish button. And what it will do is it'll basically go through the process for each individual mailbox and tell us whether or not it is able to enable that mailbox. So here it's enabling the administrator's mailbox. Here's Anita Murthy being enabled. Now we've popped up the Charles Smith's mailbox. And again, it will go through and show you each individual mailbox. But instead of showing you every individual mailbox, I'll go ahead and just skip all that. And I can see that I get to a summary, and it tells us which of the mailboxes had been successfully enabled. If there was one that wasn't successfully enabled, it would tell you that in the message. But we've all been successfully enabled, so I can go ahead and just close my Enable Mailbox Wizard. And now I've enabled all the mailboxes in my Exchange environment. So what I need to do, or what I wish to do, is to go back to my provisioning groups, and if I add additional mailboxes at a later date, I want those mailboxes to be automatically enabled and not be required to come in and manually enable them. So I'll go back and change that property in the provisioning groups. So I open up the properties of the priority users by clicking on it and then selecting Properties. Then we go to our Archiving Defaults tab, and we place our check in front of the Automatically Enable mailboxes. And then we can click OK. And then we have to repeat that for our two other groups. So we select our laptop users, select our properties, go to the Archiving Defaults, enable the automatic enabling of mailboxes, click OK again, and do it one more time for my standard users by again selecting the standard users, opening the properties, going to the Archiving Defaults tab, placing a check mark for the automatically enable mailboxes, and click OK. Now in our demonstration, we're ready to move on to our next step, which is to start archiving mail. So we're going to go through and show you some of the different options that are available to archive the mail. And we're also going to look at some of the reports that are generated as part of the process of archiving the mail. So to do the archiving, we have to go back to our tasks again. So we'll go down here under the Enterprise Vault servers, under the EV server, and click the Tasks node. And then we're going to manually run the Exchange Mailbox Archiving task for Server 1. So I select that, and then I can right-click on it and select Run Now. And then for our Run Now, we're going to go ahead and instead of archiving all the items, or even archiving up to 200, we're going to change this to 10. We are going to do archiving and shortcut processing in this first one, so that's what that is selected under the run mode. But we don't want to do it for everybody's mailbox. We wish for our first example just to do it for one mailbox. So we'll change the number of mailboxes to select the mailboxes. So when I click the OK button, it gives me the option of filtering it. If I know the name of the mailbox, I could do that. Or I could just list all the available mailboxes and then click OK. And the mailbox that we're going to archive some items out of is going to be Davina Gilman. So I have Davina Gilman selected. I go ahead and click OK. It comes up and gives me the prompt telling me that it has been successfully selected for mailbox archiving, and it has started processing that task. If it had failed, it would let you know that it had failed at this point. We can go ahead and click OK to close out our acknowledgement. And now what we'd like to do is that before we go ahead and initiate the archiving on the rest of our mailboxes, run the Exchange Mailbox Archiving task in report mode. So I'll go ahead and come back and right click on it and select Run Now again. But this time we're going to change the run mode to Report. And when I select Report, notice that the different options on the dialog box change. So I'm going to select the Report on All Items and Report on All Mailboxes. So I go ahead and click OK to start that processing. Here it tells us that it has in fact started the processing for the Exchange Mailbox Archiving task. So I go ahead and click OK. To go and see the actual report this time, I know there's going to be a lot of information in it that may be a little bit hard to read in Notepad. So I'm going to open it up in Microsoft Excel to see it in a spreadsheet. So I'll come down and start my Microsoft Excel by clicking my Start button, selecting the Microsoft Excel option. And now I have to open the file and navigate to the report folder again. So I come up to my Office button, select it, and then I can select the Open option. And then again, our location for the report folder is on my computer's D drive, under the Program Files. Open that up, under Enterprise Vault folder. And then I need to get to where the Reports folder is, so I'll scroll down, open up the Reports folder. And now we have an additional folder. The last time we were here, we only had the Exchange Provisioning folder. Now we've got the Exchange Mailbox Archiving folder. So we'll go ahead and open that up. Now, when it saves the actual report, it saves it as a TXT or text file extension. So I have to tell Excel not to be looking for an Excel file, but to be looking for all the files. Once I've done that, I can then go ahead and open up the file by double-clicking on it. And this is going to go through the import process. We're just going to accept the defaults for an import and just directly create or click the Finish button here. So when I click Finish, it's populated. But you can see I got the pound signs there, so some of the values are bigger than the cell size. So I'll come up here and format our cell. So I click on Format, and I'll select the Auto Fit Column Width. Now you can see the information that's being displayed is the system name, which is the Exchange server where the mailbox exists. It gives you the Active Directory distinguished name of the particular user whose mailbox we're archiving. Then we see the login or associated account for that. And then we can see the mailbox state, if it's been enabled, if it hasn't been enabled. For example, remember we took the EV_service out when we were enabling mailboxes, so it sees it as a new mailbox which hasn't ever been enabled. However, it's not currently enabled. Then we can go ahead and scroll over to see some additional information. And here we can see the date, the start time for enabling it, the end time. We can go through and see the number of archivable items in the mailbox, the total size of the archived items. And again, there's a lot more information here. We're not going to look at every single column, but it will show us every single mailbox here. So you can see I get all the way down through V. Sharma's mailbox with that particular information. So I'm going to go ahead and close this Exchange spreadsheet, the Excel spreadsheet. And we don't need to save it. We've got the report. We can come back and open it again later if we wanted to. So now we want to go ahead and have it archive 10 messages for all of the mailboxes. So I come back up and right click on my mailbox archiving task, select the Run Now option. But this time I've decided instead of doing both the archiving and shortcut processing, I'm just going to have it do archiving. And again, we don't want it to archive everything, so we're going to change this to archive up to 10 items. However, we do wish for it to be for all of our enabled mailboxes. So I can go ahead and click OK. And again, it tells us that the task has started the process of processing that action. So we'll go ahead and click our OK button. And now we're ready to see if anything has actually been archived. And we'll perform searches on the archives to determine that. So I'll come over here from my Enterprise Vault nodes and expand the archives. We are looking at our Exchange Mailbox archives, so I'll go ahead and click on Exchange Mailbox archives. And the one that we'll search for an example, let's select Diana Palmer, let's say. And then to be able to search Diana Palmer, we have to have permission to read their archive. By default, the only person who has permission to read their archive is that person. We're currently logged on the Enterprise Vault server as in Kapoor, who is our power administrator. So we're going to give the permission to read Diana Palmer's archive to in Kapoor. So when I right-click on their menu option here, the first thing that I want to notice that Search Archive is not an available option. And again, that's because at this point, in Kapoor does not have the read access to Diana Palmer's archive. So we'll click on Properties to open up the Archives Properties page. We can then go to the Permissions tab, and we will add in Kapoor. So I'll click my Add button, and I will scroll down to find in Kapoor. I've selected in Kapoor, so I can go ahead and click the Add button. And then I click OK to add them to the group of users that I want to give the permission to. And the only permission that I need is to have the grant permission for read. So that is the default permission that was assigned. So I can go ahead and click OK. Now when I come up to Diana Palmer's archive and do a right click, you can see that I now have the option of searching the archive, because I can now read that particular archive. So I'll select the search archive, and this opens up the integrated search functionality. Now in a later lesson, we'll get into more detail about what the integrated search capability does. We'll also do a demonstration later that talks about more of the functionality of the integrated search. But for right now, we'll just run a search by clicking the Find Now button without any criteria to see all the items that have been archived in Diana Palmer's mailbox. So I click the Find Now, and amazingly enough, remember we archived 10 items from everybody's mailbox, so it was able to find 10 items. So if I want to go through and open an item up, I can go ahead and double click on it here in the integrated search. So I'll do that for this message. It will open it up in its original format so that I can read it. I can go ahead and close this. And again, we will have a later lesson to go into more detail about the integrated search and all the features that you can do with that. But for right now, we'll just go ahead and go back to the list of the available mailbox archives. And you can see that when I did enable the mailboxes, it has in fact created an archive for every enabled mailbox. And that brings us to the end of this demonstration.